In Washington, D.C., he's known as the Drug Czar. Officially, he's the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. This afternoon, his message to local politicians was simple. Too many Americans are using illegal drugs.
We have regrettably had over 25 years of intense experience with the drug problem in the United States. Almost, and I believe every family in the United States has been touched by substance abuse. We are facing the consequences of what is essentially a problem that too many of our children and young people before they reach adulthood, when they're on the cusp of adulthood, are subjected to dangerous addictive substances.
In attendance, marijuana advocates, and very quickly, controversy.
In the last 2 years, for the first time, we had more teenagers seeking treatment for marijuana dependency than for alcohol, which never used to be the case because of the greater availability of alcohol. You're entitled to your own opinion. You're entitled to do whatever you want, speak whenever you want, but I don't think you're entitled to your own facts. Shouting people down doesn't make what you say true. Well, let me just say one thing about that. I'm a public official. I am subject to scrutiny of the press, of the Congress, of officials at various levels. What I say, what I write, what I'm responsible for can be questioned and debated. I never heard of you.
At the heart of the debate is the so-called war on drugs. America's drug czar argues the U.S. is spending more on treatment, and he denies the heavy spending on policing is a war.
We still have too many people using drugs in the United States, and we pay too high a price for that. But the fact is, it's not a war, it's a responsibility of society to protect its children and those who are sick. And I don't think any society is going to say that's responsible or democratic that it's going to stop doing that. The population of Baltimore today is estimated at 600,000, and there are an estimated 40 to 60,000 IV drug-dependent individuals. It's almost unbelievable the levels of HIV and hepatitis infection in subpopulations of Baltimore, and this is the place that pioneered needle exchange and other harm reduction policies funded by George Soros, among others.
We have about 59,000 cocaine and heroin addicts in Baltimore City. That translates into about 1 in 8 adults. If there is to be a war on drugs, that the war on drugs should be primarily a public health war, not a criminal justice war.
I know Kurt Smoke. I've known him well. I've been at 3 seminars with him in California. He's not the mayor now, but I'm very familiar with Baltimore. They had masses of deaths with shared needles, and he tried to save lives and save the spread of disease by having a needle exchange, as is what's happened in a lot of American cities. And there was a twist put on that today. I think Kurt Smoke moved forward in a progressive way. He wasn't defeated because of his drug reform policies.
And following the speech by America's top drug policy man, Vancouver's Mayor-elect Larry Campbell did not back down on his promise to push to liberalize Canada's drug policy.
Has anybody ever solved it by having a war? Never. No, it doesn't matter where you go, it's never been solved. Can we possibly make it any worse than it is? Is that possible? I don't think so. And so I want to try different things. I know that the community does, and if they're harmful, we won't be doing them.
Okay, we would like to hear from you on this issue. What are your thoughts on the drug strategy of John Walters? Call us 1-to-1 at 602-662-6397, or it's toll free at 1-800-665-6397, and there's our email address, canadanow@cbc.ca.
The timing of his controversial visit is no coincidence.
It was a clash of ideals between the hard U.S. attack on drugs and the kinder, gentler Vancouver approach.
I ask you to seriously consider what the United States would look like if there were 55 million drug users or 110 million drug users.
We're trying to listen to you.
U.S. drug czar John Walters speaking at the Vancouver Board of Trade, a conservative business organization that's been critical of City Hall's new approach to Vancouver's drug problem. Amid a table of hecklers from the marijuana party, Walters delivered a warning about pot.
In the last 2 years, for the first time, we had more teenagers seeking treatment for marijuana dependency than for alcohol, which never used to be the case because of the greater availability of alcohol. You're entitled to your own opinion. You're entitled to do whatever you want, speak whenever you want, but I don't think you're entitled to your own facts. Shouting people down doesn't make what you say true.
Walters also warned about going easy on drug users. He says harm reduction programs like safe injection sites simply don't work.
If you want to see the consequences of some of these decisions and their tangibility, you have to look at where they have been tried.
Places like Baltimore. Walters says that city tried needle exchange programs and other harm reduction policies. When
he left office and the new mayor there took office, Baltimore was, by any measure, the most harshly, most brutally treated city with regard to addiction of any city in American history.
Vancouver's outgoing and incoming mayors admit there are major differences between the two countries. However, both welcome the chance to hear from the U.S.
I just think that there's different approaches, and I think that we've got to exchange ideas like this and try and work together.
I don't necessarily agree with all of his views, but I think that we should be looking at it and taking it for what it's worth.
What drug czar John Walters made clear today is that he's not trying to tell Canada or Vancouver how to run its drug programs. However, he says any country that's soft on drugs should look closely at the huge problem in the U.S., created by a society that went easy on pot. He says that may provide a new perspective. Mike Chisholm, CTV News, Vancouver.
The war on drugs took on some friendly fire today when a major American player came to town. U.S. drug czar John Walters was in Vancouver to speak to the Vancouver Board of Trade. This is a man who is known to be critical of Canada's so-called soft position on drugs and opposed to drug reforms in general. Such reforms are very much in the plans for Vancouver, so when Vancouver's outgoing and incoming mayors heard about his visit, they weren't amused.
The drug consumer in the United States is the single biggest funder of anti-democratic forces on the right and left in this hemisphere.
Not everyone agreed with today's tough message coming from the U.S. White House. John Walters plays a leading role in shaping and implementing drug policies in the U.S. The American drug czar told guests at a Vancouver Board of Trade luncheon that Canada and the U.S. must work together to combat the use and trafficking of illegal drugs.
Too many of our major cities have open-air drug markets where drugs are bought and consumed as if they were de facto legal. We need to change that, and we're not going to save enough lives until we do.
It was as if the White House director had timed his visit to coincide perfectly with events in Vancouver. The city intends to tackle its festering drug problems with a 4-pillars approach: prevention, treatment, enforcement, and harm reduction, which some say really means safe injection sites.
If you change policy to make there be more users, there's going to be more addiction. There's going to be more of the consequences of addiction. It in some ways will unfortunately cause more casualties in Canada.
Mayor, he says if we move forward, we might end up with more users, more addicts, and more casualties. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that for one moment.
The open drug use in the downtown east side was the overriding issue in the civic election. The new council's approach to the problem is softer than what our American neighbors are proposing, but the newly elected mayor won't be bullied off course, which means an ambitious plan to open safe injection sites early in the new year.
Why would I feel pressure from the Americans? I'm a Canadian. And we're going back to this whole thought that a needle exchange causes addiction. I mean, it's like flies causing garbage. By January 1, I'm hoping to have a safe consumption site in Vancouver.
Look at our experience. Try not to have as many casualties as we had, because I think it's preventable.
Outgoing Mayor Philip Owen listened to the statistics and dire warnings, but feels perhaps the U.S. shouldn't be so quick to write off this city's approach.
The current status quo is not working. Let's implement this. Let's try it. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, then we'll change it and alter it. And perhaps we will learn something, and we could help the United States with an experience that we'll have in a certain area of drug reform that they're not moving toward.